Hi, Mrs. Norris here. So today we're going to continue our discussion about the events that eventually led to the American Revolution. And to understand how those events unfolded, we need to understand the American colonies and their reasoning behind wanting to break away from British rule. So hopefully by the end of this unit, you will be able to answer the question of what it means to be an American and what it means to be a colonist. I'm wanting you to understand that there were significant developments that occurred during the colonial era. There was a creation of a colonial economy that was based on agriculture, commerce, so that's business, and small scale manufacturing, so the production of goods, making goods for buying and selling, and the perspective of regional differences in the British North Atlantic colonies. So each of those 13 colonies had their own characteristics, and those characteristics shaped who the colonists were that lived within that colony, as well as how they looked at the other colonies and the British rule over them. Okay, so we've been doing a series of activities that compare and contrast the regional characteristics of the original 13 colonies. So, what I wanted to talk about today, what I really wanted to focus on, was the idea of mercantilism and the triangle trade and the introduction of slavery into the colonies. But to understand that, I want to take it back to the reasons why explorers started looking for a new place to settle and why America, or what we call America now, was the place that they chose. So, from previous discussion, what you should remember was that the reason why they came to be was come later was known as the three G's. Right. So we have God. People came for religious freedom. A lot of different groups were being persecuted by British while living in Europe, and so they wanted a new place to come and practice their religion freely. Also, they wanted to come and spread their religion by converting the people who already lived here. The second G is gold. So obviously they came searching for wealth, searching for ways to make money. So the second G is gold. And then finally, glory. Just the idea that their country was able to spread its wings and spread its control throughout the world. That was a huge idea to them. So why did they come? The three G's: God, gold, and glory. So they settled in three colonial regions: the North or New England region, the Middle region, and the Southern region. Okay. So let's look first at the New England colonies. And the New England colonies are made up of what we call the states of Maine and then part of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Okay. So you can see the products that were made or manufactured in the New England colonies, the northern colonies. And you can tell that they are centered around the idea that these colonies are so close to or along the Atlantic Ocean. And that would be because they can easily be shipped across the sea back to England, or shipbuilding and timber. Those are actual necessities for sea travel, obviously shipbuilding and then timber. So their economy was definitely heavily based on the idea that they were along the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, you can see that there's a little bit of cattle, but for the most part, it was these sea-based manufacturing, or these sea-based goods that were being manufactured in the northern colonies or the New England colonies. The middle colonies had a little less of contact with the Atlantic Ocean, so they weren't as reliant on those sea-based manufactured goods, but they were reliant upon goods that could eventually be sent overseas, right? iron, wheat, timber, and then all of these other animal type products, cattle, fish, fur, pigs, and sheep, that they could send across seas if they needed to, or because they were located along these rivers, they could be sent up and down between the colonies within that region. So they relied more on trade within each other and less on having to ship goods overseas, right? Part of that was because their goods, like timber and iron, could be sent to another colony to manufacture and send across to England. And then finally, the southern colonies. And you can tell that these naval stores, where these little baskets are, naval stores are where you store naval weaponry. So their access to the Atlantic Ocean was less reliant upon manufacturing goods and more upon storing military weaponry, right? And then they were able to use their access to the water to produce things like rice, which needed to be watered, obviously, and tobacco. But again, we have another agricultural type situation where they rely less on their access to the Atlantic Ocean and more on the rivers for transporting goods and the land space for farming. So let's return to that idea of mercantilism. So that's the idea where there's the mother country or England, and then we have the colonies. And you can see from the picture here that goods are coming from the colonies to the mother country and going back to the colonies. But the colonies were discouraged or not permitted to really exchange goods between each other unless it was a way to get goods to the mother country, like timber and iron. Okay. So they sent their raw resources to England. So let's use the example of timber. Okay. So those colonies, those middle colonies, and well, all of the colonies had some area that was based on manufacturing timber, cutting down trees into logs. So cutting down trees and leaving them in their original form as a log, that's a raw resource, right? So the colony would send our red arrows here, their raw resource, and in this example, a log of wood, to England. England would use that raw resource, and in this example, we're talking about a log of wood, to make a product. So they use it to make chairs, tables, any other kind of furniture made out of wood, right? And then they sell that product back to the colony. Okay, now a couple of problems with this. First of all, when they sell it to the colony, they sell it at a higher price than had the colony just built it themselves, which is the second issue. They could have just built those tables and chairs themselves. They could have sold it between each other to make money for the colony itself, but that was something that the mother country, or in this case, England, wouldn't allow them to do, right? They wanted them to strictly send the goods to them so that they could sell them back at a higher price, because now they can charge them for actually making the table or chair, and they can charge them for the cost of shipping it across the Atlantic Ocean. So that was what the mother country wanted to do. They wanted the colonies to make them money. So this was the gold aspect. The colonies made their money for the mother country. Okay, most of their money and income was going back to the mother country when they could have kept a lot of it for themselves by just trading within the colonies. And that was something that the mother country discouraged. And this is something that is still carried out today in its own way. So the idea of buying American means that, you keep all of the money within your country and you don't allow them or you discourage them from spending their money other places, right? So it's the same kind of idea. So a lot of this was based on the idea of triangular trade, where raw materials went from the colony to Britain. So that log of wood went from a colony to Britain. This is how slavery is introduced. Africans are going to the Americas to help with that raw material, the production of raw material that was going back to Britain. And then goods were coming from Britain back to the colonies. So the furniture that was being built out of the raw materials the colonies sent to Britain was now going back to the colonies at a higher price than had they just made it themselves. Okay. So to kind of talk a little bit more about this activity or this idea of mercantilism and learn a little bit more about it, we're going to complete an activity called Mercantilism, Triangular Trade, and Slavery, the British Empire and the Colonial Economy. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Okay, and at the top we have the lecture that we just discussed in case there's anything that you would like to review for yourself. Okay, and then down at the bottom you have an activity. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Open Assignment. Okay, and we have our activity here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Okay, and it's very simple. It's a 3-part activity. Okay, so for the first part, you're going to learn a little bit more about what mercantilism is, and we have a couple of videos here for you to watch, including kind of a silly video here. Okay, and I want you to evaluate or look at in detail this image, and if you need to make it bigger, remember, use the presets. Okay. And then use what you learned from these videos and from looking at the image above and write your own definition of what mercantilism is. So you're just going to erase this text and type your answer here in your own words. What does mercantilism mean? Okay. Who controls trade laws and prices in the mercantilist system? So who is in the most control in this system? Okay. How much of a say did people in the American colonies have over their trade laws? So in other words, did the colonists get to choose who they wanted to trade with and what they were allowed to trade? Or did England control everything? So type your answer here, and it's not just yes or no. It's use evidence from what you watched in the video and from looking at this graph above. Okay. Who benefited greatly from the mercantilist system, the colonists or the mother country, and why? Why do you feel that way? So don't just give me a single word answer or a couple word answer. Tell me why. What evidence? Again, the idea is to use evidence to explain your answer, where your answer comes from. Okay. So next we're going to move on to the triangular trade system, and there are 4 different videos here. They're all very short, and I want you to write at least 5 notices or wonderings now that you have now about it. So the things that you noticed and wondered after watching those videos, just list them here, at least 5. If you want to write more, that would be great. Okay, and then we have some maps to look at. So here are a couple of different maps, and then there are links to maps here. And like it says, you need to have Flash. If Flash isn't working for whatever reason, that's okay. Just move on to a different resource and then answer the questions here. And then finally, apply. Imagine that you're an American colonist that makes a living trapping and selling beaver pelts. And here's an example of beaver pelts here. Okay. Why would an American fur trader, so somebody who makes a living trapping and selling beaver pelts, not support or like the idea of mercantilism? And explain in 3 to 5 sentences. So erase this text and type your answer here. When you're done with this activity, please submit it into Canvas by returning to the activity and clicking Submit. And that is your task for today.